Hey everybody, how's it going? This is great. I don't usually get a whole intro music like that, so that's good. That's hyping me up. Yeah, we've got a great few sessions here today. We're doing the NFT explorations. I think we have 4 pretty great panels. So we're gonna start off with this first one. It's I think it's the title's Bored Apes, Blue Chips, and where we go from here. So yeah, if I can get all my panelists out here. Yeah, so we've got Maaria from Sound Ventures, Richard, co-founder of Manifold, and then 0xB1, aka Jason, on the end here. So yeah, why don't you guys all introduce yourselves and just give a background on what brings you here.
Yeah, I'm Maaria. I'm with Sound Ventures. I'm the partner who heads up all of our blockchain investing. I also work on a bunch of different NFT projects. So I'm co-founder of a company called Sixth Wall, which created the Stoner Cats NFT collection, and then also did the gimmicks. And we just announced Armored Kingdom on Near yesterday. And yeah, I've been in the space since 2016 and do a lot of stuff in NFTs.
Yeah, hi, I'm Richard. I'm one of the co-founders of Manifold. Manifold creates tools that enable creative sovereignty for artists. We help artists deploy smart contracts and mint NFTs on those contracts. On top of that, I've worked on probably 24 or so top NFT collections.
I'm 0xB1, also known as Jason. I'm best known for running a large DeFi portfolio in 2020 and 2021. We were one of the first large institutional investors at a wide scale in the NFT space starting probably October 2020. Mostly punks, art blocks, eventually evolved to Bored Apes, and then more recently co-founded a decentralized leverage trading platform which uses NFTs as liquidity called Photo Finance.
Great. Yeah, I think conferences like this, right, they're kind of a good time to take stock of the last year, right? They're good checkpoints. I joined CoinDesk in June as kind of the NFT reporter. At the time, it was kind of like a beat nobody wanted, right? It was whatever it was, June 21. NFTs were kind of just hitting their stride. And now I'm looking at the PFPs of all you guys that we have on the screen here. We've got the punks, the Bored Apes, the mutant apes, and just kind of like the gravitas that those cartoons hold, right? But back in June, obviously, it was a different story. I would just love to hear what the last year has been like for all of you guys, just kind of in your personal lives as NFTs have kind of ascended as this really incredible asset class.
I think for me, it's I came into space and started as an art collector, collecting NFT art. And then, the whole PFP wave came in and just rushed in, and everyone just started buying and buying a lot of these PFPs and just going crazy over them. And at that time, when I started, NFTs were cool, but then they became these huge asset classes in themselves. And it's just been this wild rush, just watching everything go up, right? And even for myself personally, before I was just a developer, and now all of a sudden I'm this punk that's everyone recognizes now. And so, it's really cool just seeing how identity has played into this. And then, where we're at right now, it's we have all these PFPs out there, which are great. And, I think it's just really cool.
Mm-hmm. I think, if I think about a year ago, right? A year ago was when we launched Stoner Cats. And the environment then is very different from the environment now. Obviously, I would have changed and done things slightly differently if I could, knowing what I know today and hindsight in 2020. But what I really liked about that time was the opportunity to experiment and the idea that you could bring in, you could go more mainstream, you could bring in the masses. People were super interested to experiment, to try, to test new things. And I think over the last 6 months, I would say, it felt a lot less like experimentation and it's felt a lot more like speculation. And there's been this fervor, I feel in the ecosystem where it's if it's not up and to the right only, it's a rug pull. And I don't think that's actually good for this ecosystem and good for this economy because it doesn't allow people to experiment. And I think experiment is how we fuel innovation.
Yeah, I also think that it's really interesting that in the last 6 to 9 months, we've seen this shift toward you have to do a token or you have to provide utility or you have to do X, Y, Z to get people interested. And from my standpoint, when we got in and started buying art blocks very heavily in October 2020, in November, it was really about the art, right? Mm-hmm. We thought that this was going to be a shift for the traditional art world, and it was like a new blockchain technology, and then it became its own asset class, and then PFPs became more of a social community type of asset, and the values went out of control, not because of the art. Like, sure, the art is great in a lot of cases, but you look at like Goblins today or other crazy projects, MFers, people use them as, I wouldn't say status symbols, but more as like, recognize me as being part of this community. And I feel like that major shift, along with this monetization of the NFTs, kind of brought things in a direction that we weren't really expecting. We were talking in the lounge earlier about this idea of ownership of collections, and this kind of forced push to make artists or teams kind of own their collections more than maybe they originally intended, right? Like communities demanding that they do X, Y, Z, and a lot of that may have to do with royalties and other potential things. But what if we didn't have that? What if we just went back to art, and just went back to, you collect this because you like it without having any expectation of the people releasing what they are. It's great to see when people do it, but at the same time, it should be on the communities to do stuff with this. With these assets and with this art, just like we're seeing with Jenkins and a bunch of other Mutant Cartel. It's really cool when we see the communities actually building something out with this art that they love, and I think that that's more honorable in some ways.
And you could also go out, actually, I would argue that you could also go outside of the art world, like thinking about like token gated merch, right, or like NFT gated merch, right? There's just so many different layers to what NFTs can actually enable, and I feel like Manifold works on a lot of that stuff because you guys are at the forefront of innovating on it. But like, it's not just the art and what you can do with the IP, but it's also the underlying NFT architecture, like ERC 721s or 1155s. You can actually do so much more with it.
So much. It's like it's also perfect for financial derivatives. People don't realize that the majority of liquidity in DeFi is actually held in ERC 721s because Uniswap v3, the largest pool of liquidity that's for trading, all of that liquidity is held in ERC 721s in NFTs. Same, our platform Photo does something similar, but for leverage trading. The actual ETH USDC is held in this self-custodied NFT, and people don't realize that NFTs as a technology are probably, I think the roadmap for where people may take them is way more geared toward finance and financial derivatives, and is just a better system than having to deposit your assets to an exchange, or decentralized or centralized, and then not having control of it. NFTs allow you to have unique control of your assets, right? Whether they're ETH, USDC, other coins, or whether it's art and the ownership thereof. So I think that what we'll see, especially in the down market, is people using NFTs not just for utility, but for other use cases outside of traditional art, or some combination thereof, right? There's a lot of NFT lending going on right now. I think that that's been really awesome, and yeah.
Yeah, talking about NFT lending, it's something I've been covering, my own reporting for a bit. Kind of an interesting sector, right, that's popped up. One of the many that have popped up around kind of the NFT mania and the PFPs, right? Talking about NFTs as their own asset class, do you think that kind of this larger market, because so far we've seen it as kind of an asset class that's like a little bit separated from just the general market, right? Like even like today, right? Like ETH is dropping a ton, the market's in tough shape. But if you look at like the Bored Ape floor, for example, it's still 90 ETH, whatever, it's still holding strong. Same with Punk, same with all these things. Do you think we're kind of poised for some kind of maybe correction, or that could kind of disrupt not only the PFP communities, but maybe the larger lending ecosystems?
Not financial advice. I actually think we'll see a greater deviation of kind of blue chip floor prices, and the market, especially if the general market keeps going down. People can't, again, we were just talking about this, people can't sell their PFP and hope to buy it back at a better price, or they can hope, but there's no guarantee that they'll be able to do that, right? They might have some random top 1,000 coin that they're like, oh, this is going to go down another 50%, I'll sell and hopefully buy back later. But I feel like NFTs will have greater resiliency because they're unique, they're non-fungible. You can't know that you'll get something back. So that kind of idea, I think, begs for this disconnect between how the regular market is affected and then how blue chip NFTs are. And then further, I think that with all these NFT lending platforms, JPEG, Drop, Bend, NFTFi, Arcade, those things are just reinforcing this ability for people to not necessarily get out of their NFTs because they have another option of what to do during this bear market, right? So they can borrow ETH, they can borrow USDC, whatever it is, and lenders are actually, from what I've seen from Nexo and from MetaStreet, they're more willing to lend against NFTs at these like 30 to 40% LTV ratios than they are lending against other random shitcoins on like decentralized lending markets, because they know with more certainty that there's going to be demand at, you know, at least half of the floor price that NFT is, right? So I feel like we'll see more willingness from a greater number of lenders to lend against these, you know, resilient blue chip collections, and that will only help these collections during the bear market because there will be liquidity that doesn't require selling. So people can actually have some capital efficiency with these assets as well.
Well, Richard is a great example of not wanting to sell your blue chip. I don't know if you want to tell the story.
I guess, yeah, so the story is, you know, so I have my Punk. I've been using it as my PFP since I bought it pretty much. And then, you know, one day I got offered $10 million for my Punk, and I said no. And people were like, oh, you're crazy, right? But to me, my Punk isn't a liquid asset. I'm just never going to sell it because, you know, it represents me. It's part of my brand, my identity, right? And so, you know, from a liquidity point of view, it's not liquid, right? So, but it's not something I care about.
Do you feel any different about that now in the market conditions compared to, you know, September 2021 when ETH was $5,000?
No, like I said, it's just, I've never thought about, you know, the price of it, right? It's just not something I think about. It's just, yeah.
It's the same with a lot of my NFTs, mainly for the opposite reason, because they're worth, you know, almost nothing. But the price to me is like a second thing, right? I kind of just own it, and I couldn't sell it if I wanted to. But
I mean, my Punk's going to zero now, so it doesn't matter anyways, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be interested in hearing from you guys about, we've talked a little about like the space in the last 6 to 9 months, and how there's been kind of a maturation, right? But in a lot of ways, like NFTs kind of fail in public, right? It's not really like a linear progression where we're kind of like building. Like a lot of the times it's like you mentioned goblins, right? I love the Goblin project. I think it's kind of like a response to the whole, you know, Moonbirds meta, right? Where it's like, kind of, you know, making fun of like these really top tier projects that are kind of inaccessible to a lot of people, right? What are some of the, you know, the ways you guys think that the NFT space can be improved in terms of, you know, accessibility or whatever it is?
Well, I think there's a balance between, you know, being able to fail in public and not having that, you know, ruin your reputation forever, balancing that with accountability. I think that's a really hard problem that we have to kind of solve in this ecosystem today. One thing that we actually did that I thought was really interesting in a way to experiment with what NFTs can do is, so we launched a project called The Gimmicks, and The Gimmicks is an animated short series. The NFTs were free to mint. There was no royalty or anything like that, and we launched it on Solana. It was 7-minute episodes launched every week. And if you were an NFT holder, you actually got to participate in the storyline. And so, like, every week the episode would end, you'd have the weekend to vote, and then the next episode would come out the following Friday. And if you voted, you got this fungible token that has no financial value. It's called a dick punch, a DIC punch. And you could give and receive these dick punches on Solana. And it was incredible because like over 8 weeks, we had over 700,000 dick punches given and received on Solana, which was like the most engagement that Solana, the ecosystem, has had for any one collection, right? And it was a really interesting experiment for us. I mean, it was silly because it was, you know, very South Parky, stupid, but great. But it was a way for us to experiment, like, okay, do people actually want to engage in content? Like, does the community actually care about that? And like, our thesis was always yes, and we tried that with Stoner Cats, and then we tried it again with the Gimmicks, and the Gimmicks really showed us, oh shit, like, people do really want to participate. People do really care. Like, there are other things that you can use NFTs for. And so I think being able to experiment like that when there isn't a financial value attached to it gives you a lot of room to play, and I really like that part of building.
Yeah, I sort of think this bear market is kind of good right now because it will allow people to experiment more and try new things without that expectation of like price go up.
Right. Yeah, I also think that As much as I have mixed feelings on merging utility with PFP or art collections, I think that on one hand it's great. On the other hand, not having it allows for communities themselves or individual holders to figure out what they want to do with these collections or with the pieces that they have to actually bring them to a greater audience, right? And that's why, I don't think that Mutant Apes need that, but what Lior Masika is doing with Mutant Cartel is absolutely awesome. They're building out like their own stories, comics. I think they're doing a TV short. They're also building their own kind of add-on PFPs to the Mutant collection. They're doing like the Mutant Dogs. I think they come out next month. What he's doing is awesome. What Jenkins has done, not just with the Bored Ape ecosystems, but they're now working with a bunch of different projects to create like storylines, books, other like online shorts. And I think that that's what we're going to start to see more, especially as creators and project teams get kind of maybe sad or down during the bear market. We'll start to see the communities that really care about these collections start to come together and say, hey, what are we going to do to continue the longevity of this and to continue to keep people interested? And that comes down to individual creativity. And I think that's great, right? That's what we all came here for with decentralization.
I love that. I love that so much. I think it's hard.
Very.
Like, it's like, because people, oftentimes like your creativity is limited to what you kind of see in front of you. I think that about myself a lot, where like I'm not that creative and I kind of have to see someone else do it beforehand in order for me to see what I can do. And so I think you will start to see that, but I think you're going to see a lot of collections probably like the community wants that, but they might not know how to actually do it.
Yeah, no, it's hard, and hopefully communities learn from one another, right? But at the end of the day, you can't rely on the project teams necessarily to do it all for you. And I think that the collections that will get even greater adoption or grow their influence and notoriety will be ones where the community ends up, leading some initiatives themselves, whatever those initiatives might be.
Do you guys think we can still make mainstream adoption kind of a goal in the bear market? I think it's interesting how it seems like it's almost been on the back burner in the last couple months, right? Like introducing all these people, even though it really shouldn't be in theory, right? Like it's not like the average person cares about the price of ETH or something like that. Do you guys think it's still a goal within your individual ventures?
I think so, and I don't think it like getting big brands or making it mainstream has to be like the 10K PFP collections, right? Going down that rabbit hole. Like I think what POAP has done in terms of like being able to engage a community or bring in a community and reward them with these badges essentially. I think loyalty reward programs are going to be very interesting for brands. I mean, there's just so much interesting stuff that the technology or infrastructure and architecture of NFTs enables that it doesn't have to necessarily be about the art or the PFP collection. Or there's the applications I think are endless for brands.
I think we're going to see just more accessible NFTs, right? Before with the prices, I think it wasn't accessible for the average person. But as people are aware and brands are aware, they're just going to start developing more tools and more innovative experiences that just isn't focused on the price, but more on the utility for the brand itself. Yeah,
like we want people to associate the word NFT with not just PFP collections, not just crazy priced things that a lot of the world doesn't even consider art, right? So whether that's coming back to different use cases like POAP, or a lot of companies are working with brands and projects to do in-game items or to actually have the pieces of GameFi be NFTs. All that stuff kind of contributes to 5 years from now during the next bull or whenever it is, people have been thinking and been touching NFTs in all these different ways. They won't just think about a single PFP. They'll think about this fundamentally, new technology which all of these pieces of infrastructure and art have been built on top of or been released through. And that's kind of, I think, how we get this larger type of mainstream adoption, where people start to understand and see that it's not just PFPs, it's not just art, it's a medium of non-fungibility, right? It's something unique that gives ownership back to the people holding that. Again, whether it's a POAP, whether it's PFP, it's instead of working with centralized companies like a Meta or when you have like Activision Blizzard, where you can't move your gold in between different games. Like those types of things start to affect a much wider audience, and why I think that
Well, it's like
people
credit card
should be
rewards
interested.
programs, right? Like your credit
And
card
reward
rewards
programs,
programs is like, if you have it on your Amex, you can't transfer it anywhere else.
Or you can for 10%.
Or you can for 10%.
Right, but why should that be?
Yeah, exactly.
Pay a minor 0.5%, and you should be able to transfer it between.
I just think we're going to see like these PFP or these companies develop more IP that's not just NFT related, but like more traditional media related. I've always believed that good content is good content, right? And so you can see things like comic books, movies, television programs, right? And that's a way to funnel money back into the ecosystem that's not just related to the NFTs themselves. I think that's how you kind of grow a more bigger, wider consumer base.
Something in my mind, I coined it, but I obviously did not. I think about like Web 2.5 a lot, right? Kind of like the middle ground. And I think that, in kind of the climate we have now, right? Like Web 2.5 things might be really successful. Have you guys kind of thought about that idea of maybe, putting the brakes on like a fully immersed Web3, decentralized, everyone's got their MetaMask wallets or whatever it is, to something that's more like consumer friendly, even if it's not maybe kind of like the purest vision of, a decentralized, whatever it is.
How would you define that? Like, what do you envision when you think about Web 2.5?
I think of like, fiat on-ramps, people using NFTs that don't even know they're NFTs, like the tech kind of being on the back end, but maybe the consumers themselves not really knowing the full extent of it.
I think with decentralization, I think a lot about DAOs. I participate in a lot of DAOs, and I think the challenge that a lot of DAOs have is that you kind of, in the beginning, everyone wants decentralization, but you need someone or a group of people who's kind of like who's forging the path, or who has sort of like the vision of what this can become, and it slowly becomes decentralized over time. Vitalik's actually written about this a lot, about like centralized decentralization, right? Where it's a path. It doesn't happen on day one. And so when I think about Web 2.5, I kind of think about that. I kind of think about, like, even with these NFT projects that we're talking about, these blue chips, right? Like, you kind of need someone to begin, and then the community can take over, and it becomes decentralized over time. So I think about it more in terms of framework or mindset versus like the actual underlying infrastructure that enables the technology.
But I think you're right, Eli. There probably will be a lot more adoption if people don't know what they're touching, right? If they have an app for whatever it may be for, and they're able to buy or sell, different, without even knowing their NFTs, right? Different items for in-game whatever. It shouldn't matter if they're self-contained within an app, right? But as long as that underlying technology is NFT or something, some derivative thereof, we can probably onboard the next 500 million users by them not knowing that this is blockchain technology. I think it'll be a smoother transition there. They won't feel as forced, I think, to change.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is still, of course, the stigma against NFTs too, between the non-crypto people. And I know I'm 23. I have a lot of friends who they're not into crypto, right? It's like we're talking about the dick punches, because crypto or NFTs, it leans into the absurdity and kind of the silliness, and it's tough when my friends are like, NFTs are so dumb, and I'm like, my picture of Lion is very serious business. Like, this is not, this is not a laughing matter. But it's like you can't really make that argument. But
yeah, when I tried explaining to my mom how to send a dick punch on Solana, she did not get it. She did not think that I had a real job.
Yeah.
She's like, why are you involved in this?
Yeah, well, we have a few more minutes left. Maybe, as a closing thought, everyone, we get the boldest prediction for the next year in Web3 and NFTs. If you have one.
First. I don't want to go first.
Okay. Assuming that ETH continues to be choppy or goes down, I actually think that we start to see a rise in the ETH price of floors of blue chip collections, because I think that the dollar values will stay the same or similar. They won't be affected as much, or people will see these as buying opportunities. I think that we'll also see actually greater resiliency in tokens issued by NFT projects, or at least the big ones like ApeCoin. I think that there's fundamentally different sets of buyers that are interested in that. Like there's an Ethereum ecosystem and then there's an ApeCoin ecosystem, even though it's not its own chain. I just think that there's different types of buyers, just like there's different types of holders of NFTs. So I think we see this disconnect of how the market reacts to PFPs and blue chip NFTs relative to traditional tokens. And I also think that we'll continue to see very kind of choppy reception to newly launched NFTs. I think there will be this fight between new things that are launched and maintaining the status quo of the large collections now, because there will be less liquidity from at least half of the market, the traditional crypto people, to be going in and out of these things.
I think we're going to see a swing back to more art-related NFTs. I think the PFPs are kind of went a little crazy with where they went. But artists have always been here for the art from the very beginning. I think a lot of them had to react to the PFPs by releasing bigger collections because that's what people wanted. But art, at the end of the day, art is going to be like very, very scarce. And all the artists I know are just like going to go heads down, just focus on art.
I think the next wave of innovation is going to come from brands, artists, and creators, idea people who are going to focus less on the financial aspect of NFTs and more on the utility of them. So I think the next wave of blue chip NFTs will actually be probably free NFTs, or maybe don't have any royalty or whatever it is, and are identified with your either your social status or have some other type of utility that's being used. So I think the next wave of innovation won't be speculative. It'll actually be based on true value and like what can actually be built from this architecture.
Great. Yeah, I think that's all the time we have. Can we get some applause for the panelists?